seconds. Howdy, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, and the time is 5:30 p.m. We're here for the regular session of the Coppell City Council. We do have a quorum present, so I'm calling the meeting to order. We will be convening into work session in the first floor conference room. The public is invited and welcome to join us. Thank you very much.
I'll pay you $10 to finish if you can finish it.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Time's 5:32. We're in work session of the Coppell City Council. We only have two agenda items, and the first one is a discussion regarding the agenda items. Does anybody have any questions or for the consent agenda? Don?
No, I said no.
Ramesh, did you have anything on the PCs?
The question was answered.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then the only item on the agenda is item 7. Anybody have any questions on the publication of the maximum tax rate? This is just a administrative requirement by the state of Texas that we publish a number that we promise not to exceed. I guess it's more than promise, we can't exceed it at this point. All right, so seeing nothing there, we're going to move on. Item B is discussion the City Council's fiscal budget. Ms. Bland.
This is your discussion. No. Thank you, Council. So this evening, I just want to go over what we think we heard on the 29th, and then through some continuing discussions during the course of the week related to the 25 fiscal year budget. I'm going to go through a little background, kind of setting the stage, and then I will conclude with the information that I sent out yesterday regarding some scenarios. And just for clarity's sake, as we start this, the budget that was presented as submitted with the city secretary has the tax rate based on the 46 or 0.46222, right? So that is the budget that we presented to you for consideration. From this evening forward, the bottom line is, based on y'all's discussion with the no new revenue rate, the council, from what we could tell, wants to be in this discussion where something between the no new revenue rate, a little bit of 44 cents, to the maximum rate of 46,222. So that's just kind of setting the stage. The first thing just want to talk about is just to remind everyone with the no new revenue rate versus the 3.499 limited revenue rate, the difference over time. If you adopt the no new revenue rate, what that translates going forward, that roughly $1.5 million, that represents the gap between adopting the 3.499 limited revenue rate versus the no new revenue rate. So if council chooses to do that, that just shows, I'll call that potentially lost opportunity or loss of potential revenues totaling about $1.5 million per year. So that is, all that information is for.
And compounding annually.
It would, yeah.
Ramesh, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. And Mike, for the benefit of people watching in this red line, you're making the assumption that we stick to no new revenue for next year and 5 years moving forward, correct?
It's an assumption based on that, the way that you stated that statement, yes, that no new revenue rate would still be the rate used going forward.
And it's also possible that the city council can change the revenue expectation year over year, correct?
Yes, if that's the direction that the council would like to go with. They could, the council can choose to increase the rate to recapture what the increment is that you would be not collecting this year, and to adopt the limited revenue rate. So you have multiple options year over year. From a planning perspective, as I've indicated, all I can plan to is what you do now. As far as what the impact on the revenue would be. I can't guess what the stair steps would be because I have no idea what you would do. Right? Okay. So again, this is based on the budget that was submitted on August the 5th. So you have the red box there, says proposed 2025 proposed tax rate. And so the information on the left is what the tax bill would be for an average homeowner home value in 2025. And it shows that it would be a increase on the tax bill of right at $75. If the adoption is the no new revenue rate, it's, it's de minimis, the $4 and, basically $4 for the year. So that's the difference between the no new revenue rate and the limited revenue rate of 3.499. All right? So one of the things that people may not be aware of, given how the formula works, is that in a community like Coppell, we don't have the advantage of a lot of new growth in terms of new construction. You can look when SB2 was put into place for the first time in 2021. Our new construction, you can see the small percentage and the amount of growth that we get in new construction. And overall, through time, from about 2000 on, in general, it's in a negative direction as far as there is growth, but it's not as great from year to year. And so this year, for example, the new growth only generates an additional $195,000, right? And so a community like McKinney and Frisco and still Plano and Prosper, those high-growth communities, they are able to obtain that additional revenue from new growth and it not be counted towards the no new revenue rate or the voter approved rate, right? So that is an advantage that those communities have that Coppell does not have. Now, having said that, back in the day, before SB2, all that new growth, right, everybody was getting the benefit of all that new growth and building it in the tax rates. And now, cities are limited based on the way SB2 works, right? So any questions on that in general? The question came up about 2019 and 2020. There were several hotels in there, plus Pro Lodges, those buildings on the west side of North Coppell Road. That's when that construction was going on. So that represents those 2 years in there.
Does everybody really understand the impact of SB2 on our future planning? Prior to SB2, if we came in at a number this year, we didn't have to worry about next year, because if something happened, we would have had the ability to change the rate to account for it. It gave us a tremendous amount of flexibility year to year to be able to know that the following year we would be able to adjust accordingly. SB2 essentially takes that away from us. And it's basically telling the city, us, the council, that, you know, you can't not plan on the future. You've got to understand that your rate is going to be capped at this, and you know those curves that you're seeing there would never have been able to happen. Well, the growth skews that a little bit, but like Mike was saying, in a constant environment like we're in now, you know, we're very subject to the sales tax rates and amount of sales that are generated by that, and you know we have to be very fiscally conservative and make our rate under SB2 rules so that we account for potential decrease in a future revenue. I know that we've been very fortunate to have had good sales tax revenues over the past decade, but those are not a guaranteed revenue. Back in 08 and 09, those numbers plummeted very, very low. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. This is y'all's discussion. I'm just kind of marching through this, and we'll slow down when when y'all want to questions or have any discussion. The purpose of this is just to show revenues by category from 2019 through 2025. And so when you look at 2019 to 2023, one of the things you'll notice is that on the other revenue, in 23 specifically, there is a little bit of a spike in the other revenue, and that is because of interest income, and I'll just go and show that now and come back. Anyway, that's just to represent that we have that additional revenue, because on average, our other revenue doesn't grow. On average, it's about $12.9 million, and the other revenue are things like franchise fees, right, permit fees, court fines, and those types of things. And so you don't, especially, remember, we're not having a whole lot of new construction, we have some reconstruction, but, so those fees are somewhat limited, and with the way franchise fees are done now, with what the state has done, basically there's really no growth in franchise fees, even though everybody's paying more for, electricity and gas and everything along those lines, that those don't translate to any additional revenues for the city. Because they basically limited what we can charge for our revenue, for our right-of-way, right? So to go back, So then you see sales tax, and the sales tax from 2019 to 2023 is basically the amended budget. So when you see 2024 and 2025, that's based on, you know, where we are in the current year, and then related to what we're projecting for next year. Again, remember, this is under the submitted budget, right? So we're gonna, I keep saying that because I don't want to lose sight knowing where y'all want to go with the discussion. All right. So one of the things just to be aware of with the 3.499 limited revenue rate is that, and I may mention this, back in 2019 when SB2 was introduced, we could pretty much predict what was going to happen with that limited revenue rate. It was going to generate about $1.5 million. That's about what it's doing, and that's what about it's going to do going forward, right? So this table on the right is basically showing you the cost of public works and public safety, police and fire. And you see the little light blue across the top. That's, I'll call that the freeboard above, of which the 3.499 limited revenue rate generates above the cost for public works and public safety. So when then you look to the information on the left-hand side, the ochre color, that shows that same freeboard in 2024 and 2025, and this is using the no new revenue rate. And you can see in 2026 it's about even, but then beginning in 2027, 2028, and 2029, the property tax rate through the no new revenue rate doesn't cover basically the cost of keeping the police and fire in market, because their step plan that we have adopted, which is consistent with what's in the marketplace, is about $1.5 million in and of itself. So without the 3.499 limited revenue rate, what that means from a budgetary standpoint is, because it's built into the plan, you're basically starting out below zero as you relate to property tax revenue. So I'll stop there, see if anybody's got any questions. All this is just to illustrate the impact of the difference as it relates to public safety and public works. We remember the other revenues are limited as well. So, and the sales tax, because we don't know what's happening with it, we continue to budget more conservatively. So that's why that's an important number to remember. This is just another way to look at it with the numbers as it relates to the property tax. So I won't spend a lot of time there because it's just reiterating the same thing. So this is another way to look at it. The limited revenue rate is the orange color. The total public safety and public works cost is in the blue color, and the no new revenue rate is in the green. So you can see where they cross at about 26 as far as just what the impact is going. Could be, I'll say could be, because we do have that flexibility. And then overall, I know we didn't go over our 5-year forecast with y'all this year. We will not do that again. We will go over our 5-year forecast with the council. I know we sent the information out, but basically when you start getting out in the out years, because of the limitations based on the voter approved rate, or what I call the limited revenue rate, with our expenses, with inflation, you can see that we do have to address rising expenses. Now, this is a forecast, and that is something that we're talking about already as far as how do we do that. So for those that have been on the council for a while, you may remember in the 5-year forecast, I know Mayor and Brianna remember this. I don't know if we were doing it that much then, but there was a time in the 5-year forecast, you know, it was projecting out the property tax to be like, I don't know, 80 cents, or 79 cents, and the expenditures were growing and everything along those lines. So the reason I say that is because the 5-year forecast is a tool, that is all it is, that allows us to be able to look forward. And it's something that this community, and we continue to do, has probably been doing it for over 25 years. So it's very helpful. It's always helpful to be able to see that, see what potentially could happen if we don't make adjustments, but we've always made the adjustments as we've gone along in the 5-year forecast. All right, so, based on what we think we heard on the 29th in the course of the conversation, the two main points were everybody around the table seemed to express support for the budget as it was presented, as far as what was in the budget and what was being done. Then we were asked to basically take a look and see if the no new revenue rate were used, how would we make up the difference on the approximately $1.5 million, right? So, two things right off the bat that all these scenarios take into account is we had discussed with you that we were conservative and we used the 2.5% interest on for interest income. So we went ahead and bumped it up to 3%. Not like we're taking great risk, but right, there's the opportunity, but that is different. So that added about $300,000 in income on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we're in the process of working through contracts right now and everything. We just hadn't budgeted in, if you will, what we think the reduced contract costs will be. So we spent some time just talking about that, and that came up to about $120,000 in savings. And that was primarily in our phone systems and basically the Granicus system, which is our agenda, and all that kind of, let's just say all that kind of stuff as far as that goes. So with those two in mind, right, we can go forward and take a look at what those scenarios generate. So, in the budget that was presented on August the 5th and submitted to the city secretary, the tax rate is, that's the VAR, that's the limited revenue rate at 0.46222. That's a 6% decrease over the current tax rate. A taxpayer in the average value home in 2025 will be paying $75 more on an annual basis than they currently pay. On scenario A, right, scenario A is taking into account that 300,000 new revenue, the 120,000 in reduced expenditure. So that would take the tax rate to 0.458632, 0.458, let's just say that, okay? Because we're gonna start splitting hairs in just a minute. So that's a 6.7 decrease compared to the current tax rate. But what the difference is, you can see there, it's nearly $20 less, right? To $56 for the current 2025 average value home. So right off the top, there's a little bit of a difference right there. Scenario B and C both, oh, I'm sorry.
I call my question.
Oh, okay. Scenario B and C are utilizing the no new revenue rate, right? And so that's the tax rate of 0.448968. So both of those have the same tax rate because they're using no new revenue rate. How you get there, or how you can consider getting there, are two completely different ways. For a homeowner in that case, even under the no new revenue rate, the way the calculation works out is still a $4, over the course of the year, it's still $4 more, right? In terms of what that is. So under scenario B, if you, excluding the little bit of changes that we've talked about, under scenario B, the difference would be made up by actually budgeting the sales tax at that we are not currently budgeting for. So I think the estimate of the way things are going right now, the estimate is about $24 to $25 million, Kim, is that right? It's total grant general fund budget, not the other special revenue funds. But we're only budgeting at a number of around 17, I think. So this would then increase that by roughly 1.1, 1.2, right, let's say $1.1 million. So we would go from 17 to 18.1. And all that is just a recognition of, yes, we are collecting that sales tax, and then putting in place and budgeting for that additional sales tax. This goes to y'all's question about utilization of the general fund and just making a transfer out of the general fund undesignated. I think we got you the comment because you were talking about the bond rating. Kim did speak with Jason directly. The whole point of this is First of all, if we were to do that, that would be not consistent with the plan, so that's part of the reason why I was pretty adamant last Monday night about not doing it that way. Secondly, Jason basically said it would raise a red flag if we were to do that. And then if we were to do it a second year, it would definitely raise the red flag then for reconsideration. Point two of that is it's not consistent with the plan if we were to do it that way, because when going back to 2021 and 20, when we started setting up these designated funds, we set up a designated strategic reserve for the purposes of, if we are not successful in the lawsuit and or the legislature makes a change, we had basically, we'll call it a cushion, that allowed the council and staff to work together over the next 3 to 4 years from whenever that decision is made to make any particular reductions in expenditures, if necessary, beyond what we've already reduced in terms of our operations, right? So the plan's in place, and so if, as I said earlier, if you put scenario B into action, scenario B is actually putting into, what am I trying to say?
Activate.
Yeah, it's activating, thank you. It's activating the plan in advance of the lawsuit. Again, I would not recommend doing that, but that is an option for you to consider. And then scenario C is where there was a question about, well, okay, what if we were to reduce our particular expenses? So again, using the 300,000 in revenue increase, using the 120,000 contract, so we're consistent in all of them. So the reductions would be for Celebrate Coppell, that would be 100,000. Taking out of the general fund for sidewalks and moving that 350,000 over to the IMF fund, which is the street sales tax, and that is a purpose it's used for. And then removing the code compliance officer, approximately 100,000. Removing the economic development specialist is 100,000. And then removing the food truck and Old Town programming coordination activation, which was 500,000, right? And so each of those were related to something to the Vision 2040. And if you were to do all those, that brings you back down to the no new revenue rate. And you can see what that means. Now, one of the things, the little note that I made, there's a couple of things. One is that increased values from a home standpoint in the community were about 9.73. That was, what Kim and Jessica ended up using to calculate the tax rate. So you can see there's a 6% decrease, there's a 6.7% decrease, or an 8.7% decrease to the current tax rate. There's a little bit of a difference in terms of paying $75 for the year for the full amount of services, everything in the budget, or $56 a year for the full amount of services and everything that's in the existing budget. Scenario B is still keeping everything in the budget, and then scenario C is the one where you're actually having some reduced additions, because those are all basically new with the exception of the general funding of the sidewalks. And the last thing I'll say to you is, if the council were to say, and look, you don't have to settle this tonight, I would like to have some more clarity and direction, but over the next couple of weeks, let's, a la carte something, we will calculate, what that is and how to make that up. Just to keep it in somewhat real, if you want to write this down, for every $100,000, let's say that you modify, it's 0.0009 of a penny. So the best way for me to describe it is, it's de minimis at $100,000 a pop, right? It's when you start getting to the larger numbers, it starts adding up. So, Mayor, that, based on what we've heard over the last week and a half, this is what we have before you for y'all to have the discussion that you need to have. And on the 27th, what we'll need, that's the reason I say if we can get some direction tonight, great, but what we'll need is some clarity on the 27th, because Kim can't calculate the tax rate on the fly just like that, that evening. So the more robust your conversation is tonight, the more helpful it will be to us to know what to potentially expect on the 27th that will help you in your decision-making process. Right now, if you were to take the budget as submitted, it's a straight up .46222. Anything different than that, these are the calculations.
Okay, so Mark had a question.
Yeah, my question is, so all three of these scenarios are predicated on an increase in interest from 2.5% to 3%. How confident are we that that can occur? I mean, is this a 50-50 kind of thing, or is it 90-10? I mean,
Well, they've been saying that they're gonna do a rate decrease for well over 6 or 7 months now. It still hasn't happened. Now they're saying the job market is kind of slowing up a little bit, so it could be in September. And I think I mentioned to you the risk pool, which is really adverse to risk. They're using 3%. So that gave me a little bit more confidence to be able to say that. Look, I'm not on the Fed board, I don't know. But what are we getting right now?
5.33.
Right, so that's a pretty significant series of cuts. The banker's right there.
Well, you would, to average 3% for the year from 5.33, you would have to go down below
Yes.
it quite a bit.
So a couple of things to keep in mind is we take our investments out 6 months. That's one. Two, we're moving $31 million from the general fund to IMF if you would pass that in the budget. And then the other thing is we do invest in pools, and the pools have to, as the market comes down, they have to adjust and adjust quickly because they have to keep it at a $1 within a few cents. So that's what their weighted average needs to be, is within $1. So they sell off as the market comes down in order to be able to stay and meet their requirements.
okay, and with that explanation, I feel more comfortable about the 3%.
And it is good validation that you said
The risk pool?
risk pool is using a similar
Yeah.
projection, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ramesh?
Thanks, Mayor. And Kim, the bond that we recently issued, that money is also going to be sitting and earning some interest, correct?
It does, but that does not do anything for your general fund or any of the other funds. That can only be used for projects.
Okay,
When you issue the bonds, you state that we're using it for this.
got it, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Bijou?
Thank you.
I was about to say. I was
My-
with you.
Yeah, my question for you, the initial proposed budget was 5.352 million increase, that's about 8%, correct, from last
I
year?
think it was about a little over 7, yes. I'm looking over there. Right?
Yeah, so
How
out
did
of the $5.35 million increase to this year's budget, how much is for the police and fire step up cost?
The market adjustment and the step plan was about half of it, right?
57%.
Well,
Computer. It was about 1.1 for.
police,
Police and
2.1 for fire,
Correct.
so that's
A little over 50.
3.2 of the 5.7.
I was listening.
What about for the other employees?
The majority of that increase is all related to market adjustments.
No, I'm talking about administrative staff.
Yeah, this increase, it's 3.5% increase for merit for the balance of the organization. Maybe that's the way to say it.
So the increase in salaries was 5 million, about 5.7 million. And 1.7 million was everyone else. Public safety, so police, fire, and public works account for 3.9 million of that. Or, let's see. Percent of the increase. 69% of the increase is public works, fire, and police.
Okay, I'm confused. So out of the 5.32 million increase in budget,
So
what
I'm
is
giving I'm sharing with you the amount of increase in salaries alone from fiscal year '24 to fiscal year '25, was about $5.7 million.
okay, that is separate than the 5.35 million or 3.2 million for the police and fire step
Right.
up.
So your budget increased to $5.3 million, but there was some decreases, capital went down.
I'm
So-
talking about salaries and the step up.
So that's what I was giving you first, was the salaries increased 5.6. Let's see. So salaries increased $5.6 million. Of that, 1.1 was police, 2.1 was fire, and then about 645,000 was public works. And then about 1.7 was the remaining. So, community experience, community development, and then general, which would be finance, city manager, city secretary, human resources, enterprise solutions, the internal service funds.
So Bijou, excuse me, help me understand your question. Were you wanting to know, the total budget increase for last year, or for this year, excuse me, was 7.8?
So the budget
You're talking
increased
percent.
7.75%. The budget went up to 5.3 million.
Okay.
And
yeah.
that is because there was that's the net impact, because not every category went up. So, capital went down about $560,000, which you would expect because we set up the capital replacement funds, right? And then the other was the transfers. When you pull out the one-time transfers made in each year, the transfers went down. And that, again, is because we're doing that one-time transfer for traffic and facilities. So we did not do the one-time we didn't do the annual transfer in the budget. That's why that went down.
So I saw a look of question on your face when you asked
No,
that.
I'm okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I heard percent and I heard dollars, and so I got confused. By the way, just to clarify, there was some misinformation floating around on social media that about the 3.5%, there was some people had been told it was 3.5 cents increase, which was absolutely incorrect. In fact, if you take a look, our rate will actually be going down, not increasing. So that was some really bad social media posting.
Is there any good social media posting?
Not that I've read recently.
Okay. Just making sure.
I know, it's I got hit up by neighbors, hearing stuff, and it was like, where did you hear that? And it's like, well, somebody told me. It's like, okay. So it's good rumor. Anybody have any questions on, quite honestly, I gotta be honest. We've discussed this, the reduced scope. The one that hit me was the reduced funding for sidewalks. That, guys, we don't even wanna go there. That was the most difficult period when we didn't fund sidewalks adequately every year.
But we're not removing the funding, right? We're just gonna fund the same amount out of the IMF instead of the general fund,
I
right?
didn't take it that way.
Yeah, the idea is it's no longer being funded in the general fund, it's being moved over to IMF. All that's doing is it's replacing, doing something else. I mean, there's only so much fund in the IMF as
Right,
well, right?
But like you
So-
said, that the IMF is actually intended for,
But it can be used for that purpose, that's correct.
I don't, Ramesh,
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thanks to Mike and the staff for coming back with options in a short notice. I think for me, scenario C is no-go, unfortunately, because anytime we put it out there and say we are going to stop providing services or take something away, that's not a very popular decision. I think for me, moving forward for next year, I'll be working with the city council to see if we can do automation to reduce expenses. I think the way it is written right now, cutting services, that would probably not be a good idea.
Jim?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and speak up since I was one that proposed that we apply the sales tax to begin with. So I do want to thank Mike and of course Kim and her team. I mean, this is just wonderful that you all listened to us and presented us with actually 3 different scenarios. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm very appreciative of the effort and everything that you've done, so thank you. I don't like scenario B because I don't think we're at a point to activate the plan in terms of, as I understand the plan, it presumes that we know the outcome either of the issue, either by virtue of a final unappealable ruling on the litigation, or the legislature has spoken and taken that away from the courts. Maybe the legislature will speak. They've been mute thus far. And the litigation could go on for years. I mean, well, look,
I'm just saying
I'm
from a
just telling
personal
you,
standpoint.
they're just getting the summary judgment
I had
in
more hair before
August,
this.
and that's only on one of 4 key issues. And I don't see how in the world we get to an October trial setting if he's only entertaining summary judgment on one of the 4 issues just a couple of months before the trial setting. So I would say that's probably highly unlikely. So to activate the plan with respect to how we live under the new regime permanently, either by way of legislation or a court ruling, I think would be horribly premature. And one of the things that really came to mind in looking at it was that we wouldn't be able to tell the businesses anything as to what they're supposed to be doing to change their collection and distribution of sales tax because we wouldn't know. So I think B is out for me because I don't think it's a practical matter that we could implement it.
Can I? Okay.
Sure, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we have the same understanding. So what I heard is today, if we get over 23 million in actual, we are budgeting for 16 million in the last couple of years. And this scenario B is instead of assuming 16 million, we are going to book or assume we're getting in 17.1. So we're still not assuming we get all 23.
Well, but as a practical matter, it would actually activate the plan that would then get us over a 5-year period to living under the new rate, whatever it would be, whether we prevail in the litigation or we lose in the litigation or the legislature comes up with some hybrid. And then we would inform the businesses what they were to do with respect to their sales tax collection. And I just don't think, because it would start that process that presumes finality on the destination versus origination issue, that we'd be in a position to tell the businesses anything or to know what we were to be doing. So I think B is woefully premature. Although I thank you for bringing that to my attention and as a scenario. I appreciate the option. On A, I like that. I think it's safe to presume the 3%. Because the risk pool is presuming that, and as Don pointed out, mathematically, we'd have to get well below 2.5% or 3% to hit that average. And while I think it's possible there may be a 25 basis point cut in September and maybe another one in December, I don't think it'll be enough to get us below 3%. So, and my crystal ball is as good as y'all's is, so, that's probably meaningless. And I like the fact that we've got a little bit more certainty on the contract costs and we've got 120,000 there. So what I'd like to do in looking at this, is I'd like to take the $300,000 in additional revenue from the interest income. I'd like to take the contract savings of $120,000. And then I'd like to go ahead and accept the cut in expenditures in scenario C with exception to the compliance officer and the economic development specialist. I mean, I absolutely believe we need another code compliance officer. I've said that before, and my opinion's unchanged. And I understand and have heard Mindy's explanation for the economic development specialist. And I think we may have some activity with respect to Old Town going forward on that specialist could be important. And given the way that development's been restructured and everything, I think we need an extra set of hands on deck for that kind of work. But you know, $100,000 for the drones. The fireworks are beautiful. I think we could live without the drones. Moving the $350,000 to IMF and taking out of there rather instead of general fund is just. I mean, the work's still getting done, and I think there's an adequate amount of money in IMF where it wouldn't strip us down to anything that was unbearable. And then the $500,000 in Old Town. My thought there is that, you know, I mean, we've got the field trip coming up this Saturday. We're all really kind of scratching our brain pan trying to figure out what, if anything, we can and want to do with Old Town. I think, you know, my observation has been this council's been very deliberative in that. We're really trying to figure out what the next step should be. And so I don't see any harm in taking $500,000 off of this next year's budget for something in Old Town when we don't even know exactly what it is that we want to propose or do yet. So if you keep the two, the code compliance officer and the economic development specialist in the budget, and you remove the rest of those expenditures, and then you take advantage of the interest income addition and the contract cost savings, then you're right at $1,425,000, something like that. So we wouldn't be right at the no new revenue rate. We'd be slightly, marginally above it, but we would have shown, I think, excellent diligence on behalf of the taxpayers, and everything else in the budget gets done. And I do support, you know, the step up for all of our employees, the administrative staff, police, fire, public works, the whole shebang. 3% is a good increase, but we all know inflation has exceeded that already. So, you know, I think that's at a minimum should be done. So, you know, we're trying to balance, you know, there's a lot of expenditure that we want, but at the same time, I think staff has done an excellent job of identifying a few expenditures that we could cut. And instead of worrying so much about the revenue increase, I think we can take some off of the other side of the ledger and have a real effect on the taxes that people are paying. $4.14 plus another 5 cents maybe for the year, you know, for total tax hit is certainly something that was well within my expectations, and I'm, again, very thankful for the effort and for everything that y'all have done.
So how would that play out in the future, since this would be a one-time adjustment? How would that play out in the future as we move forward with the step adjustments and rate of inflation?
Well, I mean, we're looking at this budget now, right? So I'm worried
I
about
hope
this
we're-
budget right now.
I hope we're looking for the future.
Well, I mean, we are to the extent that we're still not getting into the sales tax. We're still not activating the plan. We're still not, you know, looking at, you know, increasing revenue per se by looking at the expenditure side. But, I mean, we could live without the drones going forward in perpetuity. The $350,000 for the IMF, I mean, that work's gonna get done, and then we'd look and see what work remained to be done over and above that for the next year, as we have every year. The Old Town activation, I mean, I don't know what we would spend it on. We don't even know what we're gonna do there. So, you know, we may look at it and say, okay, now based upon what the council's decided, you know, we're gonna need $750,000. And then we can have that discussion, or we may want $250,000. So, and as far as the savings on the contracts, I mean, that sounds like that's already baked in terms of what they're able to look at there. And then, you know, the interest presumption just puts more money on the table without changing anything. So I don't see that it really commits us to anything going forward. in any way that's irretrievable or that can't be changed.
Mark?
So, I hear what you're saying, Jim. I'm wondering if we're recognizing 3% as the interest rate. Currently, it's at 5.8, is that what you said?
5.3.
5.3. Say it comes in at 5 overall, it's a 0.25% drop. Could we take that difference and further down the road apply it to one of those things that Jim was talking about cutting? Or is it something we've got to have it to be able to plan all the event coordination for the Old Town event programming? I mean, that's something that I guess we just can't do on the fly, and could we use that money for something else? Because I think didn't you express some concern on using the IMF versus using the IMF instead of the general fund.
You're asking me, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
because you were
Yeah.
talking to him, I was making sure. No, what I'm saying is, with the use of the funds in the general fund for the sidewalks, right? And basically sidewalks, alleys, streets, but primarily for the sidewalks. By moving it over to the IMF, what I'm saying is that pool is an unlimited amount as well. So if you take $350,000 out of the general fund, that's fine, it's not an expenditure on that side, and you say, okay, well, I'm gonna budget it over here in the IMF fund, it's only so much there, and so something else will drop off. I can't tell you today what that something else is that will drop off. So does that make sense? It's just, if there's only $1 million, I'm making this up.
Yeah.
If there's only $1 million in the IMF fund, and it was all allocated for, and now I'm gonna take $350,000, I'm gonna put it in there, I still only have $1 million.
Right.
And now 350,000 of it, if we're using it that way, is being designated for sidewalks, so then something else got to drop off.
But isn't there more money in the IMF right now that we would cover the 350, still fund everything in the budget?
Yeah,
And
okay.
have a,
So this goes back to overall philosophy and direction. Because we have been functioning as if the revenues were limited by 334, we have not budgeted with the anticipation of collecting the other funds. So the answer to the question is, yes, there are other funds over there. The majority of them are being designated for different purposes. But just the annual income to the sales tax fund, much like in the general fund that we talked about, I'll go back to my story. We're saying there's only $1 million. Are you collecting 2? Yes.
right. Right. No, I understand.
But for budgeting purposes, and this is why I say the timing of this discussion just fascinates me, because we're within 2 months possibly of the trial and the legislative session. So it's just a different philosophy, it's just a different approach. And if the council's comfortable with the idea of, hey, we've been collecting that money and we'll continue to collect that money, and if we want to go spend more over there, we just amend the budget and we just go spend more of it. I mean, I don't make that flippantly when I say it, but that's the difference between how we budget and what we collect and what we're looking out for down the future.
So how much do we collect on the $0.25 dedicated sales tax for infrastructure?
Well, it's a $0.25 of the 23 or $24 million, so take a quarter of that.
Okay,
So was that roughly 6 million,
yeah,
basically?
I'll
6 million
accept
in
your
street-
math.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I just divide quarter of 20.
Right.
So 6 million in streets and sidewalks and alleys, 6 million in crime control district,
Mhm.
12 in CRDC, and of course 24 in general fund.
And the IMF, I mean, that dedicated sales tax, I mean, we have to spend it on infrastructure,
It's
right?
restricted.
It's a restricted
It's one of those
fund.
special revenue funds.
Right.
It can only be spent for those particular purposes.
Exactly.
And so again, not having the history some of the, around the council have, we have historically been budgeting in the general fund for certain improvements like sidewalks and not using those. Because then we've been able to pour that money into the Woodhorse and the various types of streets and everything like that. That's what I mean. It's just a trade-off. All you're talking about now is playing a different game than we've played before. That's a philosophical discussion for y'all, and we will adjust accordingly, right? So that's,
And we need to have that philosophical discussion, but it's not gonna be a short-term philosophical discussion. This council's been on a plan for the last 20 to 30 years that's worked very well for the city, and that's part of the staff's consternation is we're asking them to change direction, which is not anything that this council had previously even indicated to do. Ramesh, you had a question?
No, I'll hold my thought. If someone else wants to go, I'll wait.
Don?
So after thinking about this a whole lot and having a number of discussions just with different people, I go probably to the philosophical aspect of this, of what I personally I thought was an easy change ends up being has additional dominoes to fall and becomes a more philosophical discussion. And my concern at this point is adding stability and uncertainty to the staff and how they approach going forward. And I'm not saying that we can't have philosophical discussions. My concern is at sort of the last minute or the 11th hour, what I personally thought was going to be somewhat of an easy, not that big a deal, may have broader ramifications. And that's my concern at this point. I probably lean toward option A. I can see my way into option C with some variation, like what Jim was saying, some variation of cuts. As long as we don't, personally, my view would be, as long as we don't go down rabbit trails and start counting angels on the head of a pin, trying to figure out which expenses to cut and which ones not to cut out of the budget and things like that. I don't want to drag this out longer, I guess is my personal view at this point. So I probably lean more toward A for that reason, but could see my way to C. And a lot of it has to do with the stability of what environment the staff able to work under and plan for the future. And come January, I feel sure we're going to have a much more robust philosophical conversation about where does the council want to go? Does it change or not change? But there will be a lot of time to do it at that point, whereas there's not as much time to do it now.
So thank you for your comments. One of the things that I'll tell you that Mike and his staff need is they need consistent direction from us. We can't be changing our mind literally yearly and have them do a good job of planning for the future. That is their job. They plan for the future. We give them the 2040 plan and they plan for it. And going back and forth, vacillating on what kind of tax rate we're going to charge doesn't let them be able to do that. I appreciate, and yes, we will have a much more robust discussion in January. I thought we had the opportunity this past January, but apparently that was not the case. So,
Well, I'll speak for myself. I think there continues to be, I think more of us are becoming more and more educated about how the budget process works and how the financials are put together and the implications of all these things. And so I think that will also help with the conversation, understanding the ramifications. And a lot of it has to do with what staff has provided for us this is the way this really works. So I think that's part of the evolution of sort of where we are at this point. I don't feel like we've ever had a great conversation, well, not in my 3 years, let me say that. In January, there hasn't been a lot of discussion between the 7 of us about what do people think or philosophical differences or anything. And I think there will be this time, and let's see where that leads us.
Well, I'll go back to 2019 when SB2 was it 2021, excuse me, when SB2.
2019 is when it introduced.
Okay, it
It
was,
became in effect in
it was
21.
2019, we started talking about it then, and it was like, well, we've got the rate before that was 8%, that was our cap. And there was numbers that were floating all over the state legislature, 5%, 2%, 3%, 4%. They finally settled at 3.5%. Well, at that point, it's like, this was when interest rates were 0.5% or 1%. And so 3.5% to the state was a huge number. Well, we're not. We're at 5.5% this year, 5.3%.
5.3.
I mean, you know, the 3.5 doesn't even catch up with that. So we're below the cost of living or the consumer price index increase. So that's what bothers me. You know, we're if we don't adopt that voter approval rate, then we're actually moving downhill. And that's something that this council has never opted to do. And that is the philosophical discussion that we need to have. But I appreciate your comment. You know, it is kind of, to your words, a little bit late in the game, I guess, I'm paraphrasing for you, to be doing it at this point. Jim?
I mean, yeah, so if the IMF, if moving the 350 from the general fund to IMF is, or relying upon the IMF funds rather, to fund the same thing, creates any kind of a sales tax hiccup, then I'd say let's cut the 100,000 for the drones. Let's cut the $500,000 out of Old Town until we figure out what we want to do there, and let's go ahead and take the interest savings and the interest income and the contract savings, and just see where that gets us. It'd still be above the no new revenue rate, but it'd still be a significant cut in relation to the 75.36 a year that we're talking about now. And then we can talk about the sales tax issues in January. It seems like that's been a big concern and sticking point in a lot of ways. So, I mean, if that's part of the problem, let's just go ahead and proceed into the general fund for those sidewalks as we had planned, and I'd urge the balance of the expenditure cuts, along with the two base revenue and expenditure items at the front end.
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start out by saying that 2 weeks ago, the staff, Kim and team came back with a wonderful budget, and they were basically listening to what the city council wanted. And for me, when I saw that we were about $1.5 million away from no new revenue kind of a budget, which to me was 2% of the total budget, right? So I felt like this could be one opportunity where our residents could get away with not an increase. So that was my motivation, and that was why I gave the thumbs up to ask the staff to go through the pain of trying to change tracks so close to the end of the game. So that was the motivation for me. Personally, I like scenario B because, I understand, Mayor, the long-term impact. So assuming approximate numbers of, we are budgeting for 16 million, our actual, let's say, is 23 million, right? And at least for this year, we could take that 1.1, and then for next year, look at scenario C. And I think we need to be more deliberate about things that we are cutting in scenario C.
So help me out. I'm not understanding. Are you saying you're in favor of going with scenario B and looking at doing C in the future?
Yes. And if there's any painless things that we can do in scenario C, as an example, if the food truck, instead of $500,000, if it can be done in half the cost, I'm sure the staff will come back and tell us that's a possibility, and if that's the case, we should do that. But my goal is to see if there is a way that we can get the residents to pay close to the same bill they paid last year. And I understand
So even
it's not a
with-
promise we can make to them
Even with a
every
rate,
year.
even with a rate of inflation of over 5%, and even with the property value increase of 9%, is that a fair assessment?
So, yes, I mean, again, because we are so close to, if we can find 2% saving, it's an opportunity for us to give them that break this year. And I'm not saying that we would be able to do that every year, because we still have to present a balanced budget.
I guess I heard you say this year, and then yet next year you want to, okay. I don't understand exactly where you're coming from.
So, okay, let me try to simplify it. I'm trying to solve the problem for this year, which is, I think, taking the money from the sales tax assumptions, assuming that we book 16 rather, we book 17.1 instead of 16, helps us achieve the goal of not increasing the property tax bill.
So are you aware that taking the sales tax funding would jeopardize our bond rating?
No, that's not
I
the,
think he's talking about, if I understand
That-
correctly, is taking it not from the fund balance.
Yeah.
It's just budgeting more of the funds from sales tax that we have the last several years not used in the budget process.
Thank you,
So,
Mike.
the number, it doesn't matter at this point, but 17 plus or minus, out of the potential of 23,
So-
just based on what we.
So then we would change our message back to our bond council.
We would just be budgeting a little higher, maybe that's the way to say that, as opposed to what we think the impact will be. We're going ahead and utilizing more of a percentage of the sales tax than we
But
have in the past.
that is then a change in the
Well,
philosophy.
it's a different message, yes, but it's not using the general fund.
Understand.
Sorry,
Okay,
I didn't
Kevin?
know.
Thanks, Mayor. So, this is my view of everything. So, I think Mike and his team has brought us a budget of everything that we talked about and asked since last year, started the budget season. And I think that we as a council had, with respect to Ramesh joining the council recently, took the direction that we gave them and moved forward with that. That's the city manager's proposed budget, that's what I see in that. Everything in that expenditure reduction list are things that we have previously thumbs up and said that, we wanted that, and, said it supported, citizens' asks that they had in the 2040 visioning process that the citizens were engaged in. So with that being said, I fully support the city manager's proposed budget. Now, with that being said, I understand that scenario A, you've gone through and, made some adjustments and worked some numbers and things like that. I'm fully in support of scenario A, and the reason why is that if we wanted a different scenario, we should have spoken up in the retreat earlier in the budget sessions, as Don said earlier about kind of the 11th hour kind of situation. That's what really concerns me about this entire process, is that staff did everything we asked them to do, and then that shift in philosophy at the last second does not reflect the stability that this council and this organization has had over the past decades. And so while I fully understand and expect that we will have a much more robust conversation in this coming January, I do not think it's fair for us to change course and direction at the last moment. So I'm going to support scenario A, and I ask us to all bring our A game in January to, no pun intended with the A, of course, there, but to be prepared to have that philosophical discussion about what we want the future of the city, because as Mayor said, we don't get, number 5 best place in the nation to live, by changing philosophical directions at the last second. So I want us to be very mindful of that as a body, as the citizens who have elected us to make sure that we're being mindful of their money, and I think we all are. I mean, to be very honest, and I'm not trying to say this reductive or anything, but we're arguing about $52 right now. I mean, just like that, if you look at it right there, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, all right? So we're trying to be very mindful of everyone's dollars, and I feel that respect around this table and in this room. But I want us to just be very considerate of what that philosophical direction is going to be, and maybe potentially communicate to staff how we need to see data presented to us so we can make a more informed decision about, you know, what things might be added or taken out of the budget if we go, you know, with a voter approval rate or a no new revenue rate, and really look at those tangible things, because I think that will really help this council. I will say that I really appreciate staff on scenario C going through and actually labeling things like, this is what it would take to get us there. This is what it would take to remove. So I think that the tangible nature of looking at certain items helps us really see what that effect is. So I appreciate the work of staff, but I'll be supporting scenario A in this, with the notion that we will be having an excellent conversation come January.
Thank you. Brianna?
One of the things I've always appreciated about everyone who has sat around this table before us during our service, and staff that has been here for years, or staff that's here currently, is that we haven't looked at a budget in a vacuum, in a tunnel. We haven't looked at it for that particular year. Staff and council has always tried to look at it holistically, right? Like, how is this going to affect other people around the table? Like, setting it up for financial stability and being fiscally responsible in what we do and how we spend our money, and always thinking about the future. And so I just want to be, I think, like, I hear everybody's thoughts and concerns, and I appreciate staff going back and even, you know, listening to everyone's concerns, even at the timing, you know, maybe not necessarily being ideal, but making sure, like, let's just look at this. Let's look and see if there's any couch money, as you would say, right? And look to see if there's anything different that we can do. But I also trust the fact that they have looked at that, and that, and I know that the directors with Mike's leadership, have been very diligent about the types of projects that they put in front of us, and have really thought through and listened to our citizens. And so I just want to be careful when we start thinking about, well, let's just not do this, or let's just not do that, because I haven't been out there right now, but I don't know that there's, you know, and I have seen in the past, right, in situations of potential tax increase where we've had lots of people out there. I haven't seen that, right? I haven't seen that this time around. There are a few people, they have concerns, and rightfully so. We should have that. People should question what we're doing and make sure that we're doing the right thing and making sure that we are looking at our budget. But I know, and I can only speak for me, is that we are transparent about everything that we're doing. And I know that staff has gone back and looked at every scenario, and I just want to be careful that we aren't minimizing, or, how do you say this, decreasing the needs and the wants of what our citizens look for, right? Like, I know we can say, well, we just won't do the drone show, right? It's $100,000. Gosh, do you know how many people loved the drone show, right? Like you think about what our, and that's just one example, but if you like, we pay so much for surveys and to find out what our citizens want and what they need and why they live here. And I just want to make sure that we're not looking at this in tunnel vision and being like, let's just take this, this, and this, because it has long-term effects. And, I mean, as Councilmember Neville said, like, it affects all of us, right? $52, $10, any type of increase affects all of us around the table and everybody, and I wanna be mindful of that. But I also wanna be mindful of the fact that I know that staff has thought about, has looked at this holistically, and I just wanna make sure that we're not doing something to then put future council members and staff in a bad position or in a negative position later because of what we did today. So all that to say is I support, scenario A. I want to make sure that we continue doing what we're doing, and that we're also thinking about, Jim, Councilmember Walker, you make a good point about who knows what's gonna happen in 2 months, right? Putting our lawyer hat, right? Let's be realistic. This has been a conversation for years. I've been long enough to know that we've been talking about it, but we don't know what we don't know, right? Which is why we're always trying to be conservative in what we do. So it's a long way of saying, like, I trust staff, and I know that we will do the right thing. And even if we agree to disagree, I just also want to make sure that whatever we do this as a unified council, and we support each other's decisions. So, anyway, thank you to staff for all that you've done. I'm gonna have some banana pudding. Kumbaya.
I once learned that silence is not a bad thing.
I know, but I'm just saying, neither is eating.
So she solves it by eating.
Yeah, don't give that away. That's precious stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and this is not for today, or even this month, but for January. When we go into the retreat, the winter retreat, and it's perfectly okay to discuss it before, think about that long-term vision for the city and what you want that to be. Think about how you're gonna support that as a councilman. Think about, we've got a 2040 plan that is, I think that was pretty well widely accepted by everybody that participated in it, that was part of it, that saw it. Interestingly, we, the council, had very limited input into it on purpose, which I didn't agree with initially, but I saw it worked out quite well. So, sometimes, I really thought that we were supposed to be in there being part of it, but I'm very happy the way it turned out. We do have a responsibility to that 2040 plan. And then we also have a responsibility to the city itself as an institution and our employees. It's a very complex equation that we've got. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. And that's, it's not a black and white equation. So anyway, that's part of the discussion that we're gonna have starting in January.
So what do y'all want to do for tonight? So we can help Mike out. It sounds like A's pretty popular.
Again, let me say, tonight, your most important action tonight is actually the vote you take in the regular session for advertising the maximum rate,
Right.
right? That's,
Yes.
right, that's the most important thing, whatever that is. This is the information that we would have before you on the 27th, right, in terms of what happens. Know that, I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up now just to make sure everybody's clear. We'll talk about the process more later, but the process is adopting the budget, adopting the tax rate, and then ratifying the tax rate. In the vote process, the budget can be 4-3, but the tax rate and the ratification rate have to be at a minimum of 5-2. So, there has to be some coalition, there has to be some idea of, kind of piggybacking on what Brianna said. In order to adopt a tax rate and a ratification, there has to be a 5-2 vote. My point being on all this, y'all do have to make a decision on what, however you want to slice it. I am walking out of here right now not slicing and dicing any more than what's already been done, based on what I've heard. So use that as a springboard for the next, few minutes of conversation if you'd like, or you'd like to go off on your own and kind of think about it or whatever, but,
Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. I can hear that scenario A is popular, so I just wanted to do one more minute of pitching for why scenario B is actually a better option. So you get everything in scenario A. I think in January when you made a commitment, I don't know if you made a commitment that you'd only use 60% of the sales tax, and what Mike is saying is instead of 60% we'll use 66%. So you get everything that you get in scenario A. The only difference in assumption is rather than 60% you're using 66%.
So how, in that, do you understand that you lose the SB2 margin, the 3.5%?
So yes, we don't actually lose it. We can use it next year if we want to. We're not going to. If we wanted to, we can use the 3.499 next year. On top of it, we can use next year's 3.499. So we're not losing it.
Do you believe next year that you would be able to stand up and tell your constituents that you're going to advocate for a 7% rate increase?
And Mayor, if you going to talk about hypotheticals, we can all throw hypotheticals out there. I think it's not just my decision. The decision is going to be a majority decision, right? So as a majority, we'll do whatever the majority decides. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Not directly, but anyway. I believe Jim was next.
Were you through, big guy?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So look, I mean, it seems like the philosophical toe that I have stubbed relates to the sales tax. And, obviously everyone's in favor of having a fulsome discussion about that in January, so that's good. I'm not being inflexible on all this. I mean, A is not as good as C in my view, although, like I said, I want the code compliance officer, I want the economic development specialist. Mindy says we need them. I agree with her, and I trust her judgment in a big way. So, I'm not being inflexible or anything. I mean, if A is what this group can support, then I'm in favor of A. I mean, we've managed to go ahead and find some savings on the contracts, and we've, found a little additional revenue on the interest that, it doesn't move the needle overall, but it does show that, we're trying and we're not leaving any stone unturned. At the end of the day, the reason that I don't support B, Ramesh, is because it technically activates the plan of taking what would be the final decision on what we're left with on sales tax, either by way of the court opinion or the legislature, and then implementing it. And since we're not going to know what that decision is, I don't think we can implement the plan going forward and then educate the businesses on what they would need to change in their sales tax collection and all like that. So that's what I meant when I said it's premature. There will come a time when we have that answer, and then we can have another philosophical discussion as a group as to how we want to approach that. But I just don't think we're there yet. So it really comes down in my mind to, we take advantage of the two items that staff have found for us that Doesn't sound like it comes with any undue risk. You know, we have the fulsome discussion in January about the balance. So, I mean, the drones were popular, Brianna, you're right, of course. But, you know, there's gonna come a time where I think we're going to be looking at making some potentially unpopular decisions on expenditures. And, you know, as I sit here today, $100,000 for the drone, it doesn't move the needle financially, as Mike points out, really, truly. But it signals a certain thing to the folks paying the taxes. So, but look, like I said, I'm not inflexible here. I have an immense respect for this group, as I do for the staff. And so if A is what we're gonna settle on is, you know, I mean, I'd prefer to have more than 5.2, but if that's where we're gonna settle, then, you know, I'm willing to be there with the rest of you. I much appreciate your willingness to have this discussion. After, you know, I threw the sales tax thing out there, I'm much appreciate, again, I truly appreciate staff's effort. They continue to amaze with their willingness just to go to the mat every single time. And it's really appreciated this time because I'm the one that caused all of it. So it means a lot to me. So that's where I'm at the end of the day.
So thank you. Got Kevin and then Ramesh, but I wanted to say something first, kind of clarifying. Jim is correct. There was a plan when when S 3.334 went into effect of what was going to happen to the funding. There is a plan in place. The plan was to go into place when we lost the court case.
Or one.
What's that?
Or one.
No, that's a different discussion.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
That is
fair
a
enough.
completely, that will be a
We haven't
much,
had that discussion.
that will be a much happier discussion. There are two discussions that will be had. We've been planning for the worst, and that's what that's what you're talking about.
Right, right.
The better case is we win the lawsuit and we have a really happy discussion at that point. But we're not, since we're being very conservative, that's not even on the table at this point.
Right.
Which is, going to your point, yes, then you started to partially implement the plan that was, you know, put in place 5 years ago now. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. Kevin.
Well, you guys made some great points that I was going to make as well, so I appreciate it. But no, seriously, the scenario B, I 100% agree with Jim that it does kick off that plan that we were talking about early. And really, what I really am hoping for is that we get to have that happy discussion. But to me, scenario A, it does a lot of things with continuing to plan for the future, continuing to, what I consider is it buys us time. Scenario A buys us time to where, unfortunately, if we do lose the lawsuit, it gives us the ability to have these hard discussions, these difficult discussions about reducing expenditures and things like that, but over a period of time. So hopefully we can, I don't know, like maybe wean certain services off, things like that. I think about that type of thing. It's the time that is important. Because what will jar people is if we go in and we're chopping out, several $1 million in expenses and it changes people's lives all of a sudden. If we can, just work that over a 5-year period or so, it allows our citizens an opportunity to adjust, our staff an opportunity to adjust. It allows us as a body to philosophically have those discussions about change. It allows leadership, long-term opportunities to figure out what's the directions and how they can advise us on the direction that we need to go. And then I also think about scenario A, we go back to the protecting the AAA bond rating. Again, Mike made the joke about having a quadruple A bond rating. It's because of the councils of the past have been so diligent, have been so responsible that we are set up for in the amazing position that we are now. I really think A protects all of those things. It keeps that in place, and it allows us that runway. And I mean, I remember when I ran for council in 2021, I things like looking at homestead exemption, looking at all, like we've had these discussions, and fundamentally I just don't support those things until 3.334 lawsuit is done. That's when I think we have the flexibility to be able to do that. because we have a better idea of the landscape. The legislature's always gonna be part of the play as well, you know, until there is legislation for or against, that's always gonna be in play, but at least let's get over one hurdle. And then we can start having those discussions and go from there. So again, I just wanted to reinforce why scenario A, I think for right now, in this place and time, is the right move. And then we can continue to have our discussions from there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ramesh?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jim and Kevin. I agree with what you guys are saying, and I want to correct my assumptions with our city manager. Mike, I think in 2019 or 2020, when 31334 came in, the plan that was in place is out of every $10 that's actually coming in, we will assume that it's only $6 is coming in, approximately.
Yeah, when we first started, if you remember, we talked about this a little bit in the budget this year. When we first started, it was more like 45% keeping. As we've gone each year and we continue to talk to our businesses, and the comptroller keeps changing the definition, we've identified at least one business we believe we thought we were going to lose, which is a significant sales tax payer. So that's how we've been able to jump it up. We didn't jump it up arbitrarily, we jumped it up based on what that one business and our understanding of how the sales tax works. So,
Thank you.
yeah, and the rest of that was, we also then reduced the expenditures correspondingly to then match up with the overall revenues.
Thank you, Mike. So again, I think we started off assuming for every $10 coming in, we'll assume only 4.5 is coming, and now we are up to $6 assumption. And what this plan is saying is, rather than assuming $6, let's assume we're getting 6.5. Now, it's not an immediate problem because we will still have some time to fix it, right? So if we lose, worst case scenario, if we lose the lawsuit this October, and we don't know if what the revenue coming in will drop down to 7 or 6, we don't know that, and there will be some time for us to catch up. So all of those, the reason I like scenario B is it's a good short-term fix to meet a goal, which is help our residents not have an increase in bill. So that's why I like the scenario B. Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody have any closing comments? Brianna?
I think I just wanted to echo what Jim said earlier, is just, I really appreciate the conversation. I think that's important. I think it's important that we feel safe to bring up questions and to challenge, maybe challenge or question or however we wanna bring it up, right? Like, hey, is there another way for us to do this? I appreciate the fact that, there's always multiple potential solutions that come with potential risks, but we need to know what those are, right, and think through it. So I just wanted to say, like, I think this has been a really good discussion, and I look forward to January and continuing it and thinking through kind of where could we potentially, carve, change, amend some of the expenditure as needed. So.
Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. I look at scenario A, and I think it gives us the most flexibility for the future. Should we lose a lawsuit or the legislature makes a change, it will soften that blow over the next couple of years afterwards. And when we start to get our budget in line to try to level out things. So I think that that's what I've got to support.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna give you 25 minutes back to yourselves that we didn't have before. So, the time is 7:04 PM, we're at the end of the work session. We will move into the regular session of the city council at 7:30. Thank you very much. Good discussion tonight, guys.
Yeah, he's gonna. You only get one.
Good afternoon. The time is 7:30 PM, and we're moving into the regular session of the Coppell City Council. Just as a reminder, persons wishing to speak during our citizens' appearance must sign the register located outside the council chambers and list your home address. Reverend Sumesh Jacob with the First United Methodist Church is here to give our invocation, which will be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand and remain standing. Thank you. Reverend Sumesh.
Thank you, Mayor, and all the members of the council. Let us look to God in prayer. Let us spend a moment in silence remembering the situation of escalating tensions and conflict in the Middle East region and the repercussions in the world, the war in Gaza and in Ukraine, and also the political and social turmoil in Bangladesh. Let us pray. O God, you have made us in your own image, and by your Spirit you work to redeem us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love, and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. So guide the nations of the world into the way of justice and truth, and establish among them that peace which is the fruit of righteousness. You are the source of all wisdom and understanding, and so be present with these who take counsel here in our city's council meeting to continue doing the work of our community. Bless them, that they may consult together for the common good. Direct their thoughts and words, concerns and deliberations, that all their decisions may be pleasing to you and be for the welfare of all in this city of Coppell. Through Jesus Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated. Item number 5 is our citizens' appearance. Persons wishing to speak must sign our register and list their address. Presentations by individuals shall be limited to 2 minutes each. An individual speaker time may be extended for an additional 2 minutes with the approval of the majority of the council members present. Persons signed up to speak will be called in the order that they signed up. No personal attacks by any speaker shall be made against any member of the council, mayor, individual, group, or corporation. There will be no comments or deliberations from the City Council due to the Texas Open Meetings Act. Once the timer sounds at 2 minutes, the mayor or city secretary will cut in and make the request to the City Council if they would like to expend the speaker's time for an additional 2 minutes. We do have one person signed up to speak tonight, and that's Mr. Burrows.
Thomas Burrows. I live at 138 Windpage Drive. Everybody sees that? If my location is examined you would see the only way to get to this location where I live, other than helicopter, is that I have to drive by a business owned by a council member. And if I go out the other end of my neighborhood, I drive by close to your house. Within 40 yards, I walked it off. So the comment at a public meeting by a city council member that I drive around town looking for Councilmember Carroll's or Ms. Hinojos's house. I don't even know where you people live. I don't want to know where you people live, because if I drive by your house, I might be accused of something. So, I didn't really do anything wrong. So anyway, a retraction would be great. Streetlights are not working. If we're the number 5 city in the United States, street light on North Denton Tap Bridge busted. Street light covered by trees on Denton Tap Bridges. Construction at the Methodist Church for a lot that doesn't seem to have a code permit and the erosion code around it. Dead limbs sticking out over Sandy Lake just west of Denton Tap. Massive number of limbs growing over various streets, Denton Tap, Sandy Lake, when they break and hit somebody's windshield. On Denton Tap, from this street out here to the next street up, I think, whatever that's called, Freeport, whatever, there's a massive number of telecommunication limbs in the thing. Last but not least, last month, Atmos did not do bills or meter reading. They overcharged every person in this town 50%. When I said that I didn't want to pay that, they said, well, we'll turn you over to collections and possibly take out your gas meter. So why should I pay for gas that I didn't use? And when I talked to the city manager, I was told that was not, assistant city manager, that's not a concern of the city council.
Your time has expired.
Okay. Ask for an extension for 5 to 10 seconds. Why is it not an issue for city council to be concerned when Atmos chart, if you use 10 units of gas in June, and then in July, a hot water heater and a furnace, which I don't use, they now say I use 15 units, and every single person here that has a gas line, we all got overcharged. Here's the, which I consider theft by utility.
Thank
Just
you
my
for time. Thank you for your comments tonight. I'll have the city secretary make copies of this for the council members present. Item number 6 is our consent agenda. The consent agenda is routine in nature and generally enacted in one motion. These items have been previously approved through the budget or past council actions. Any item may be pulled and considered separately. Full descriptions are available on the screen. Council, do you have any items of the consent agenda that you have any questions or would like to have pulled from the agenda? Councilmember Carroll.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve item number 6, A through E.
And seconded by Councilmember Hinojosa Smith. All in favor?
Walker, Hinojosa Smith, Carroll, Nevels, Prem Kumar, Matthew Hill in favor. None opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Item number 7 is consider approval of a maximum proposed tax rate of 46222 for the 2024 tax year and set the public hearing on the budget and proposed tax rate for the regularly scheduled city council meeting on August 27th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m. Ms. Tien.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This agenda item is being brought before you to consider approval of a maximum tax rate for the 2024 tax year, which is the 24-25 fiscal year. This item is proposing a maximum tax rate of 0.462222 cents. This is a record vote, which is required by the Texas Tax Code Section 2606, regardless of the tax rate being proposed. This record vote is required to be included in the notice of public hearing to vote on the tax rate that's published, and which must occur at least 5 days prior to the public hearing date. This notice will be published on August 17th in the Rambler and on August 18th in the Gazette. The public hearing and the meeting to adopt the budget and the tax rate is scheduled for August 27th. This item is not a vote on the tax rate. It's only a vote to publicize the tax rate will not exceed 0.462222. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions for Ms. Tien? Seeing none, Mayor Pro Tem Nevels.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve agenda item 7, considering approval of a maximum proposed tax rate of 0.46222 for the 2024 tax year, and to set the public hearings on the budget and proposed tax rate for the regularly scheduled city council meeting on August 27th, 2024 at 7:30 p.m.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilmember Carroll Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Walker, Hinojosa, Smith, Carroll, Neville's, Prem Kumar, Matthew Hill in favor, none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 8 is our city manager's report with project updates, future agendas, and direction from work session.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. For those that aren't aware, this week, utility billing kiosk went out of service. We've had some recent instances where the kiosk is malfunctioning and basically spitting the check back out. That is not how it's designed to work. So it's taking a little bit to get that fixed, and so we're working with the vendor to make those repairs. In the meantime, utility billing and the library and facilities are working to prepare the library book drop for acceptance of water bills. We have done this in the past. So beginning on Thursday, August the 15th, customers will be able to place their checks and payments in the library drop box in front of Town Center. Please do not insert cash in the library drop box, though. We'll be getting the word out on that. South Beltline, the contractor is installing the electrical service for the digital sign. Woodhurst, all the water, sewers, and storm drains have been installed. Street paving from cul-de-sac to Hillhaven is complete, and sidewalks are being constructed. DART, they completed the Freeport Parkway crossing and the southwestern crossing. They will be closing one lane on South Coppell Road beginning on August the 19th. And Fire Station number 5, the storm drain installation on Moore Road is complete, and the roadway is back open in time for school opening, and they will continue to work on on-site utility improvements. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Item number 9 is Mayor and Council's reports on recent and upcoming events. Just an advance warning, if you would like to make a difference in your community, please listen up. Apply to serve on one of the City of Coppell's boards or commissions. Learn about our boards at the coppelltx.gov/boards website. The application period will begin on August 26th and go through September 20th, with interviews being during the latter part of October. Item number 10 is public service announcements concerning items of community interest with no council action or deliberation permitted. I would like to make a note, and I wish I had done it when Reverend Samesh was here, to keep the family of Sergeant Randolph, a Fort Worth police officer who was killed in action yesterday. Keep his family in your prayers. Anybody have any PSAs? Mayor Pro Tem Nevels.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the community, I'm sure as many know, school's starting this week. So we've had several of our surrounding districts start on Monday and today. And Coppell ISD will be starting classes tomorrow. So wish everybody a successful launch to the school year.
And watch out for traffic. Any other PSAs? Thank you very much. Item number 11 is necessary action from executive session, which we had none. So therefore, there being no further business before this council, we are adjourned at 7:43 p.m.